3:12 a.m. The streets of Abidjan, usually full of nightlife, were instead haunted by silence. Then the headlights flickered. Military vehicles crept like shadows. Communications towers blinked out. The national television station was taken in less than 20 minutes. By dawn, the Ivorian tricolor no longer flew for the man who claimed to have led Ivory Coast into its golden age. President Alassane Ouattara, hailed by the West as a democratic stabilizer, was gone. No gunfight, no farewell speech, just gone. But this wasn't just another coup in West Africa. This wasn't about the economy. This wasn't about military salaries. It was personal and political. It was about betrayal, about retribution, and about revolution. According to multiple sources within the Transitional Council, Alassane Ouattara had allegedly helped facilitate covert regional operations to destabilize Burkina Faso, specifically aimed at undermining Captain Ibrahim Traore. The same Traore who had become a symbol of Pan-African resistance against neo-colonial control. The same Traore who had survived assassination attempts, economic sabotage, and diplomatic isolation. And now, it seemed, the shadows behind those attacks were beginning to unravel. Ouattara, once praised for peace, had allegedly been playing a double game. And the Ivorian military finally said, enough. So what really happened? Why did a seemingly stable regime collapse overnight? And how is this tied to the seismic power shifts rippling across West Africa? In this video, let's break it down. When Alassane Ouattara came to power in 2010, Western capitals cheered. He was their model African president, a former deputy head of the IMF, educated in the United States, with seamless ties to France, Washington, and Brussels. He spoke the language of markets, stability, and structural reforms. To investors, he was gold. To diplomats, he was safe. And to Western media, he symbolized Francophone Africa's modern future. But inside the Ivory Coast, a different story unfolded. What began as a hopeful shift after the post-electoral crisis of 2010 to 2011 slowly morphed into something darker. The democratic mask remained. Elections were held, press statements issued, and opposition figures tolerated, barely. But real power was becoming increasingly concentrated in Ouattara's inner circle. Institutions bent toward the executive. The military restructured into a loyalty machine. Political rivals were slowly pushed out, silenced, or imprisoned. Then came 2020. Using the 2016 constitutional revision as a loophole, Ouattara announced he would seek a third term, a decision widely criticized by constitutional scholars, opposition parties, and civil society. Protests erupted in major cities, particularly among the youth who felt betrayed by a system that promised change but delivered only recycled elite rule. The regime responded with brutal crackdowns. Over 85 civilians were killed during clashes. Opposition leaders were arrested or barred from running. International responses were weak. European statements used the language of caution and stability. No sanctions were imposed. No electoral observers were pulled. Behind the scenes, French and EU officials viewed Ouattara's re-election as the least chaotic option in an increasingly turbulent region. But inside the Ivory Coast, the people saw what was happening. And more importantly, the army saw it too. And the Burkina factor escalated it. You see, while Ivory Coast simmered under internal discontent, a storm was brewing next door. In September 2022, a young military captain in Burkina Faso named Ibrahim Traore did the unthinkable. He overthrew a foreign-aligned president, expelled French troops, canceled IMF programs, and declared a new age of sovereignty. To many in the West, Traore was dangerous. To many in Africa, he was loyal and revolutionary. The Burkina model, military-led, youth-backed, anti-imperialist, became a beacon for the region's frustrated militaries and civil societies. And Ouattara, long considered the West's most stable partner in West Africa, felt the ideological tremor. Privately, intelligence reports began circulating in Abidjan. Traore's speeches were being shared on encrypted apps by Ivorian junior officers. The military academy had seen an increase in cadet resignations. Several soldiers had crossed into Burkina on unauthorized leave, only to return radicalized. The revolution was leaking across borders. According to a 2023 leak by a dissident within the Ivorian military police, Ouattara had been in direct contact with French and ECOWAS officials, discussing strategies to neutralize Traore's growing regional influence. The goal was to isolate Burkina diplomatically and, if necessary, support internal destabilization. Intelligence analysts within Ouattara's circle feared that if left unchecked, the Burkina model could inspire military dissent across Francophone Africa. But their warnings came too late. The ideological seeds had already been planted, and in the barracks of Bouaké, Korhogo, and Yamoussoukro, the question shifted from "what if we followed Traore's path?" to "when do we?" You see, revolutions often begin in the shadows, whispers in cafeterias, glances exchanged in training exercises, words left unsaid in official briefings. By mid-2023, those whispers were already turning into plans. The coup that would later be called Operation Renaissance was born not in smoke-filled rooms of power-hungry generals, but in the quiet determination of mid-ranking officers and young soldiers who felt their country slipping away. Unlike other African coups driven by personal ambition or military factionalism, Operation Renaissance had a single guiding principle: legitimacy must return to the people. Its architects were clear-eyed. They studied failures like Sudan's spiraling instability. They wanted no repeat of chaos. Their vision was restoration through precision. The timeline was strict. The method, swift and quiet. Plans were shared through encrypted chats and handwritten notes. Power grids, air bases, and foreign embassies were mapped. Every action was reviewed through one lens. Would this protect the people? By early 2024, intelligence units began noticing signs that Ouattara was preparing an exit. Rumors emerged that he hadn't been seen publicly in weeks. An emergency diplomatic delegation from Paris arrived with no media coverage. His cabinet was reshuffled quietly. The president, once ubiquitous, had vanished. To the conspirators, this was confirmation. The regime was vulnerable. Therefore, when the operation launched at 3:12 a.m., it moved with precision. State media was taken without a single shot. A young lieutenant declared, "This is not a coup. This is a restoration." Within 30 minutes, the Presidential Guard stood down, its commander defecting with most of his men. The palace fell not in flames, but in surrender. And Ouattara? Gone. Evacuated in secret under French protection. No hero's exit, just silence. Before we continue further, tell us, are you enjoying the video? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black Africa. Let's continue now. If the world was stunned by Ouattara's fall, it was floored by what came next. Ivory Coast, a country many feared would descend into post-coup anarchy, instead became a case study in calm. The military, true to its promise, did not impose rule by uniform. Within 48 hours, a civilian military transitional council was formed. It wasn't top-heavy with generals. It included respected civil society figures, economists, religious leaders, diaspora legal experts, and youth delegates from universities and rural unions. Markets reopened with minimal disruption. Schools resumed by the end of the week. The internet, often the first casualty of African coups, remained live. The press was free. Even embassies, though cautious, issued rare praise for the restraint and responsibility shown by the transitional authority. The military takeover was so silent that many don't know a coup has taken place. Then came the announcement that rewrote everything. No member of this council shall contest future elections. We are not here for rule, we are here for renewal. It wasn't just a promise, it was a declaration of intent, one that no West African coup before had dared make and keep. Audits were announced. the French military presence was to be reviewed. A new civic charter was drafted in public forums. A 6-month roadmap was released. And most importantly, the people were invited in. This wasn't just a fall of one man. It was the attempted rebirth of a nation. However, the global response was shameful and hypocritical. When the first announcement came out of Abidjan in an army broadcast declaring a peaceful transfer of power and the fall of Alassane Ouattara, the world's reaction was swift but hollow. France, Ivory Coast's former colonial master and its most entangled foreign stakeholder, released a carefully worded statement urging calm and monitoring developments. In Washington, the U.S. State Department echoed the same tired refrain. We call for a swift return to constitutional order. But these weren't calls for justice. They were calls for control, thinly veiled attempts to reset the very system that had just been rejected. In the eyes of many Africans, these statements revealed something far more dangerous than bias. They exposed a pattern. These Western powers had long cloaked themselves in the language of democracy while enabling the opposite. The same France that now pleaded for stability had remained silent when Ouattara changed the constitution to rule beyond his term. The same U.S. that asked for dialogue had shrugged when journalists were jailed, activists were beaten, and opposition candidates disappeared before the 2020 election. Their concern now, after the fall, was not about democracy, but about disruption, about losing a reliable proxy. Meanwhile, in West Africa, the atmosphere was electric. In Ouagadougou, Bamako, and Conakry, capitals of countries that had already taken bold steps to reclaim sovereignty, the coup in Ivory Coast was not seen as a rupture, but a reaffirmation. Public statements were celebratory, describing Ivory Coast as having rejoined the family of nations, choosing dignity over dependency. From students lighting candles in Dakar to farmers dancing in Korhogo, the response was not fame, it was freedom. In Ghana and Senegal, where leaders still tried to balance foreign allegiance with domestic frustrations, there was no condemnation, just silence. The kind of silence that speaks volumes. Because they too could hear the applause rising from their own streets, and they knew the people were watching. Yet, while the world debated whether to label the event a coup or a correction, inside Ivory Coast, the real work had begun. It quickly became clear that removing Ouattara was not the end game. It was merely the opening move. What needed dismantling wasn't just one presidency, but an entire apparatus. Over a decade, Ouattara's administration had built a spiderweb of corruption, crony capitalism, and silent authoritarianism. His escape, facilitated by French security agents just days before the operation, didn't sever the system. It only unmasked it. Within a week of the takeover, the Transitional Council launched audits of the country's largest ministries. What they uncovered shocked even seasoned observers. Over $1.22 billion had been funneled through offshore accounts in Paris, Dubai, and Mauritius, laundered via shell companies tied to Ouattara's family and inner circle. These funds were linked to infrastructure ghost projects, overpriced military contracts, and cocoa revenue that never reached public accounts. But financial reform wasn't the only focus. The transitional government announced a full review of foreign military presence, particularly French bases. The message was clear. Strategic partnerships must serve Ivorian interests, not foreign ones. Mining contracts were suspended pending renegotiation. For the first time, the Ivorian public heard an open debate, broadcast live, about the CFA franc, the colonial-era currency still controlled by France. Suddenly, a nation that had been muzzled for years was not just speaking, it was demanding. But despite the magnitude of corruption uncovered, there were no mass purges. Instead, a National Reconciliation Commission was formed, chaired not by military officers, but by retired judges, human rights leaders, and respected economists. Former ministers who had fled were given a narrow window to return and face justice, or forfeit their citizenship. Others who had remained were placed under investigation but not immediately imprisoned. This wasn't retribution, It was reform. What do you think? Was the reason behind the coup local, or because Ivory Coast's president was involved in the coup against Ibrahim Traore? Why did France and the US panic more at the fall of Ouattara than at the suffering of ordinary Ivorians? In the comment section below, share your thoughts on the fact that if the West called Ouattara a Democrat while silencing Ivorian voices, who defines democracy in Africa? Foreign diplomats or the African streets? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We bring videos on Black Africa, its history, rich arts and culture, and things the world should know about. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.